Brooklyn, Illinois wasn't the kind of town that made headlines. It didn't boast grand skyscrapers or glittering beaches. It wasn't the birthplace of any presidents or the home of movie stars. It was the kind of place where time slowed down, where old men gathered at diners with chipped mugs of coffee, and where the scent of fried chicken and freshly cut grass seemed to cling to the air. Everyone knew everyone, and everyone's story was interwoven like a thread in a hand, stitched, quilt passed down through generations. Emma Hayes had lived her whole life on Elm Street, a narrow road lined with maple trees that blazed red and gold each autumn. Her house, a 2-bedroom ranch with faded green siding, sat directly across from a cornfield that stretched for miles until it blurred into the skyline. Her mother, Cheryl, worked double shifts at the county hospital, a nurse with eyes that always looked a little too tired and hands that always smelled faintly of antiseptic. Her father had left when Emma was 7, leaving behind a garage full of his old baseball trophies and a silence that never quite left the house. Still, Emma was never really alone, because just 3 blocks down, at the corner of 6th and Laurel, lived Katie Williams, her best friend since 2nd grade. Katie, with her strawberry blonde curls and infectious laugh, had been Emma's anchor for over a decade. From summer sleepovers to first heartbreaks, they'd been inseparable. The kind of friendship that didn't need words, just a glance, a nudge, a memory. The Williams house was always warm, always loud. Katie's mom made the best cinnamon rolls in the world, and her dad had a booming laugh that made Emma smile even when her own home felt like a cave. It was in that house, those walls, that Emma felt like a part of something bigger, like family could be chosen, not just inherited. But then the summer before senior year began, and everything shifted. It started with a text. Guess who's coming home today? Katie's message buzzed across Emma's phone at 8:13 a.m. On the first real day of summer break, Emma blinked against the morning sunlight filtering through her curtains and groaned, grabbing her phone off the nightstand. Woo! The response came almost instantly. All I am, hide me. Emma's fingers hovered over the screen. William, Katie's older brother. The last time Emma had seen him, he'd been in his final year of high school, a tall, lanky guy with an emo haircut and a bad habit of interrupting their sleepovers. He'd been all sarcasm and rolled eyes, the kind of older sibling that was more nuisance than mystery. But that was 3 years ago. He'd gone off to the University of Chicago, only coming home during major holidays when Emma was usually busy with extended family out in southern Missouri. She hadn't seen him in years, hadn't even thought about him much, until now. Emma sat up, pushing her tangled brown hair out her face, and walked to the window. Outside, the summer sun was already starting to bake the asphalt. Birds chirped lazily, and a lawnmower droned in the distance. She typed back, "That should be fun." No, he's probably going to steal the car and eat all the cereal again. Tell him to bring me donuts and I'll allow it. Noted. Come over later. Emma smiled. Always? By 5 p.m., she was standing at the Williams' front door, the familiar scent of baked cinnamon and warm air drifting out the screen door. The sound of someone clattering dishes came from the kitchen, and laughter echoed from upstairs. The house was the same. The same worn welcome mat, the same slightly lopsided photo collage on the hallway wall. Katie opened the door with her usual dramatic flair. "Brace yourself," she whispered like it was a war movie, then pulled Emma inside.
"Where is he?"
"Backyard. Dad's grilling. He brought friends like he's still in a frat or something. I swear if he even mentions crypto." Emma laughed and followed Katie through the living room, down the short hallway, and out the sliding glass door. And that's when she saw him, Liam Williams. But not the Liam she remembered. Gone was the shaggy hair and acne-ridden face of a teenage boy. The man standing at the grill, laughing at something one of his friends said, had broad shoulders and a sharp jawline dusted with stubble. His hair was shorter now, messily swept to the side, and he wore a faded black t-shirt that clung to him just enough to make Emma feel self-conscious about noticing. He turned when the screen door clicked shut behind them, and for a moment their eyes met. It was brief, just a flicker, but something in Emma's chest shifted. "Emma," he said, like he wasn't entirely sure. She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "It's been a while?" His smile broke slowly, lazily, like he wasn't in a rush to fill the silence. "You got taller?"
You got tattoos?
she offered, pointing to the ink peeking from under his sleeve. He glanced at his arm, then shrugged with a grin. "Bad decisions, college, you know." Katie snorted. "Don't flatter yourself. It's not even a cool tattoo." "It's a quote from some poetry book." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Which poem?" Liam hesitated. "Pablo Neruda."
Katie gagged.
"See what I mean?" But Emma was still staring at him. Not because of the tattoo, though that was intriguing, but because for the first time in years, Liam Williams wasn't just Katie's brother. He was something else entirely. She tore her gaze away and tried to shake the thought, but it lingered, subtle, unwelcome, like the ghost of a dream you can't quite remember. The evening passed in a blur of grilled burgers, backyard banter, and lazy laughter. Liam's friends eventually left, and the family trickled back inside. But Emma stayed on the back porch with a glass of lemonade in hand, swinging gently on the old porch swing as dusk settled in. Liam came out 20 minutes later, two beers in hand. "Didn't know if you drank," he said, offering one to her. Emma hesitated, then took it. "Not really, but thanks." He sat beside her, the swing creaking under their weight. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just new. "You really grew up?" he said after a while, not looking at her. "So did you," she replied. He smiled, and for a long moment, they just sat there, watching the fireflies rise from the tall grass. "I used to think you hated me," Emma said finally. "I did," Liam teased. "You and Katie were loud and glitter, obsessed. You were a smug know-it-all." He laughed. "Still am." Well, she laughed too, and the sound felt real, like summer itself had settled between them. He turned then, just slightly. "So, what's next for you?" After senior year, Emma exhaled. "Honestly, I have no idea. Everyone keeps asking. I have a few decent grades, a few small scholarships. My mom wants me to do nursing, but I don't know. I don't feel called." "Who says you need to have it all figured out right now?" Emma shrugged. "Seems like everyone else does." Liam looked down at his hands. "I didn't."
Still don't.
"I'm on this business major track, mostly because it made Dad happy. But sometimes I wonder if I'm wasting something." She looked at him, really looked. "What would you do if no one was watching?" He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried weight.
"I'd write."
Emma blinked. "Really?" He nodded. "Always loved stories, but no one thinks that's a real job. Not where we're from." A silence stretched again, this time warmer.
You should.
She said. "Right. Yeah." He met her gaze again. "Maybe I will. If you promise not to laugh." She tilted her head. "Only if you promise not to disappear for another 3 years." They both smiled. In that moment, something invisible passed between them. Not a confession, not even a realization, but something was born. A flicker, a warmth, a shift. Neither of them said anything more. They just sat side by side as the summer night wrapped around them like a soft, unfolding secret. The summer thickened like syrup over Brooklyn, Illinois, The days stretched long, endless, heavy with the scent of sun-baked grass and honeysuckle. Time passed in slow, sticky minutes, afternoons drifting lazily into evening, as if the sun itself was reluctant to set. Emma began spending more time at the Williams house. More than she used to, more than she probably should have. It started with excuses. Katie's mom needed help baking something. The family was hosting a barbecue. She left her sunglasses behind. But soon, she stopped pretending she needed a reason. Katie didn't question it. Why would she? They were best friends. And Emma still laughed with her, still shared secrets and chips and Spotify playlists. But under it all, something unspoken had begun to bloom, something Emma was terrified to name. It happened in small moments. Like the night Katie fell asleep during a horror movie marathon in the living room. The credits were rolling, the television screen casting a dim glow across the couch. Emma shifted to grab the remote and caught Liam's eyes from the armchair. He was already watching her. He didn't look away. "You always hated these movies," he said. Emma's voice was soft. "Still do." "Then why do you watch them?" "Because Katie loves them, and I guess I like having an excuse to be scared next to someone." He smiled, and she looked away too quickly. Or the time Liam found her sitting on the back porch alone, reading Catcher in the Rye for her AP Lit class. He stepped outside barefoot, holding a coffee mug even though it was nearing sunset. She didn't know why, but her breath caught in her throat as he leaned on the railing. "Hate that book," he muttered. She glanced up. "You and every other guy who read it too young and thought Holden was a genius." He laughed, surprised. "Wow, coming from my entire adolescence." She grinned, her fingers still on the pages. "Just saying. Some people mistake cynicism for insight." He walked over and sat beside her, the old swing creaking under his weight. "What would you write if you could?" Emma blinked.
Right.
"Yeah. If you weren't stuck reading whatever Mrs. Harper shoves at you." She stared into the pages, but didn't read. "I don't know. Maybe stories that felt like the ones I wish someone told me growing up, not fairy tales. Real ones. The kind where people mess up and still get to try again." He was quiet for a long time. "I'd read that," he said finally. A pause. Then, "I'd read you?" Emma turned her face so he wouldn't see her smile. There was a new rhythm to her days now. Mornings were hers, quiet, predictable, mundane. But afternoons were liminal spaces. They stretched into golden hours that left her skin warm and her thoughts tangled. Katie was often around, but sometimes she'd disappear. Errands with her mom, a job interview, an orthodontist appointment. And those were the moments Emma hated herself for waiting, for hoping, for wanting him to come outside, to talk, to see her. Liam never made a move. But sometimes he'd say things, look at her a certain way, brush past her with an accidental graze of his fingers that felt anything but accidental. It was like they were writing a story in glances and pauses, every scene building tension, every sentence a breath held too long. One particular evening, the sky was bruised with approaching rain. Emma had stayed late, helping Katie and her mom rearrange furniture in the living room. Katie had gone upstairs to shower, and her mom was on the phone with a relative who lived out of state. Emma stood by the open window, letting the breeze lift the hair off her neck. "You always did like storms," came Liam's voice from behind her. She turned. He stood there barefoot, his t-shirt damp from sweat or maybe the air, a smudge of oil on his forearm. He had been working on the car again, the old book he'd bought with the money he made tutoring at college. "I like how they sound," she replied. "Like the world's breathing harder for a minute." He came closer. Not enough to touch her, just enough to feel his nearness. "I used to be scared of them. As a kid?" Emma tilted her head. What changed? I realized fear's not always a warning. Sometimes it's an invitation. Her heart stumbled. To what? To feel more alive, he said. They stood in silence, the room humming with something almost unbearable. Emma could hear the start of rain tapping against the windows, the thunder whispering in the distance. She looked up at him, really looked. What are we doing? She asked, barely a whisper. Liam's jaw tightened. I don't know.
Her throat ached.
This isn't fair. No, he said. It's not. And then the moment cracked. Katie's voice called from upstairs, and Liam stepped back. The tension vanished like smoke, leaving only the echo of what might have happened if she'd asked him to stay. That night, Emma lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed beside her. A text, Liam, I'm sorry. She stared at it for a long time before typing back. Emma, me too. After that, things changed again. They didn't talk as much. Liam didn't join them in the living room anymore. He stopped staying out on the porch when Emma was around. At first, she felt relief, then a hollow, slow blooming ache that settled in her chest like a bruise that wouldn't fade. But then came the 4th of July. It was tradition. The whole town gathered at Brook Park. There were food trucks, games, music, and a giant fireworks show at the end of the night. Emma had gone every year since she was 6, and this year was no different, except for the heaviness in her stomach. Katie met her by the entrance, her arms already full of kettle corn and lemonade. The two of them found a blanket to sit on near the edge of the hill, the view perfect for the fireworks. For a while, it felt normal, familiar, safe. Until Liam arrived. He wasn't supposed to be there. He hated crowds. He said so every year. But he showed up anyway, wearing a dark hoodie and baseball cap, hands stuffed in his pockets. Katie barely noticed, too distracted by some guy she used to like from biology class who now worked as a lifeguard. Emma and Liam didn't speak for nearly half an hour. But then the fireworks began, and the sky cracked open. Red, gold, silver, bursts of light streaked above them, the sound booming in their chests. Emma stared up, heart pounding. It wasn't the fireworks. It was knowing he was only 2 feet away. She could feel him. When she turned her head, his eyes were already on her. And in that instant, everything else disappeared. The sound, the lights, the crowd. It faded until all that was left was that gaze. The one she couldn't explain. The one that made her feel like her bones were vibrating. He leaned closer, just enough that only she could hear him. Come with me, he said. Emma didn't ask where. She didn't even think. She just got up. They walked together. Quietly, quickly, weaving through people and food stands until they reached the edge of the park, where the trees grew thick and the noise of the crowd softened into background static. They stopped by a clearing near the creek, moonlight shimmering off the water. Liam turned to her, breathing hard. I didn't want to come, he said, but I had to see you. Emma's voice trembled. You've been avoiding me. I know. Why? Because I can't do this halfway. She swallowed. You're Katie's brother. And you're her best friend. I know. He looked at the ground, then back at her. But when I'm around you, I don't feel like anyone's brother. I just feel like myself. Her heart cracked open. I've tried to stop, she said, feeling this. The silence was thick between them. Neither moved, and then he reached for her. His fingers brushed her cheek, hesitant, trembling, and she let him. Their lips met, slow, uncertain, like a question asked in the dark. It wasn't fireworks, it wasn't magic. It was raw, quiet, terrifying, and it felt more real than anything Emma had ever known. When they pulled apart, her hands were still on his chest, his breath still tangled with hers. This isn't a game, she whispered. I know. if she finds out. And still, they stood there, unable to let go. Because even if it was dangerous, even if it was doomed, even if it was foolish, it was real. And sometimes real is worth everything. Emma hadn't slept. The kiss played on repeat behind her eyes, unfolding frame by frame like a dream she both regretted and couldn't stop craving. Her lips still remembered the shape of his name. Her body still carried the warmth of his hands, the way his fingers hovered at her waist like he was afraid he might break something fragile. And maybe he would. Maybe he already had. The next morning, she sat at her kitchen table, untouched cereal going soggy in the bowl in front of her. Her mom was at work. Her little brother was at a sleepover. The house was quiet, and yet Emma felt louder inside than she ever had, like her thoughts had been dialed up, rushing and crashing and pulling her in every direction at once. She knew what they'd done, what it meant, what it could destroy. But she couldn't take it back, and that terrified her more than anything. Her phone buzzed once. A text. "Liam, we need to talk." She stared at it for almost 5 full minutes before typing back. "Emma." I know. They met at the park again, but this time in daylight. It was nearly empty, just a few moms pushing toddlers on swings and a teenager smoking near the far benches pretending not to care about anything. Emma sat on the edge of the sandbox, her hands buried in the cool, grainy dirt, like she could find answers there. Liam arrived in a gray hoodie, sleeves pushed to his elbows, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there the night before. He didn't sit right away, just stood there, running his hand through his hair in that way he always did when he didn't know how to begin. "I shouldn't have kissed you," he said. Emma closed her eyes. "I know," she whispered. "But I kissed you back." He finally sat beside her, close, but not too close. She hated how badly she wanted to close the space between them. "This isn't just some high school crush, Emma," he said, voice quiet. "This is more. And that scares the hell out of me." "Because of Katie." He nodded. "Because of everything. Because once this line is crossed, we can't go back. Do you want to?" His silence was her answer. And still, neither of them stood up. Neither of them walked away, because the truth was, no matter how dangerous this was, it was real. And real things had a weight that was hard to ignore. The next week became a blur of contradictions. Emma tried to act normal around Katie, laughing at her jokes, binge watching bad teen dramas, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. It lived in the way Emma flinched when Katie mentioned Liam, in the way she avoided his gaze across the dinner table, in the silence that filled every space between what she wanted to say and what she was allowed to. One evening, after a lazy Sunday cookout in the Williams' backyard, Katie pulled Emma aside and plopped down on the swing set like they used to when they were 12. "You okay?" she asked, chewing her bottom lip. "You've been weird lately." Emma forced a laugh. "I don't howl. I don't know." "Quiet. You zone out all the time." Did something happen with Derek? Emma blinked. Derek had been a guy from school she'd kind of dated, more out of pressure than actual interest. She hadn't thought about him in weeks. "No," she said quickly. I've had a lot on my mind." Katie narrowed her eyes in that way she did when she was putting puzzle pieces together. "Is it someone new?" Emma swallowed hard. "No." A beat passed. Then Katie smirked. "God, I hope not Liam. That would be so gross." And Emma laughed, or tried to. It came out like static. Katie didn't notice, but Emma felt it, the lie, heavy and bitter in her mouth. Later that night, she found Liam in the garage. He was working on the book again, grease staining his hands, music low on the old radio. She leaned against the door frame and just watched him for a moment. He looked so focused, so steady. Everything she wasn't. I told her nothing was going on, Emma said softly. Liam looked up surprised. She asked. Kind of. Not directly. But she suspects something. He set down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. This isn't fair to you. It's not about fair. Yes, it is. Emma crossed the room and stood in front of him. I don't care what it's called. I don't care if it's secret or wrong or selfish. I just know that I can't go back to pretending I don't feel this. He looked at her like he was drowning, and maybe he was. Me neither, he admitted, but we have to be careful. So they were. They became experts in secrets, quiet glances in crowded rooms, brushing hands in dark corners. Late night texts that never said much but meant everything. Emma lived for those small rebellions. A wink across the kitchen, a shared smile during family movie night, a moment when their knees touched beneath the table and neither of them pulled away. But it wasn't sustainable, because real love doesn't like to stay in the shadows. It demands light. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was late, almost midnight, and Katie had fallen asleep again watching Netflix. Emma had gone to the kitchen for water when she ran into Liam in the hallway. The house was dark except for the blue glow from the TV. He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand and pulled her gently into the guest room before she could think. The door clicked softly behind them. The room was small. The bed was unmade. His heart was racing beneath his shirt and hers was trying to match it beat for beat. I've been trying to keep my distance, he whispered.
I know.
It's not working. And then he kissed her again, this time slower, deeper, with the kind of H that only comes from too much holding back. Emma clung to him like he was the only solid thing in the world. For those minutes, there were no lies, no risks, just mouths and hands and the sharp, sweet pain of wanting something you know you shouldn't take. But then the door opened, light poured in, and Katie stood there. The world stopped. She didn't say anything. She didn't scream or cry. She just looked at them, at Emma, at Liam, at their hands still locked, and something behind her eyes shattered. Emma tried to speak, but no sound came out. Katie turned and walked away. The door swung shut behind her. Emma couldn't breathe. Emma hadn't slept. The kiss played on repeat behind her eyes, unfolding frame by frame like a dream she both regretted and couldn't stop craving. Her lips still remembered the shape of his name. Her body still carried the warmth of his hands, the way his fingers hovered at her waist like he was afraid he might break something fragile. And maybe he would. Maybe he already had. The next morning, she sat at her kitchen table, untouched cereal going soggy in the bowl in front of her. Her mom was at work. Her little brother was at a sleepover. The house was quiet, and yet Emma felt louder inside than she ever had. Like her thoughts had been dialed up, rushing and crashing and pulling her in every direction at once. She knew what they'd done, what it meant, what it could destroy, but she couldn't take it back. And that terrified her more than anything. Her phone buzzed once. A text, Liam, we need to talk. She stared at it for almost 5 full minutes before typing back. Emma, I know. They met at the park again, but this time in daylight. It was nearly empty. Just a few moms pushing toddlers on swings and a teenager smoking near the far benches pretending not to care about anything. Emma sat on the edge of the sandbox, her hands buried in the cool grainy dirt, like she could find answers there. Lime arrived in a gray hoodie, sleeves pushed to his elbows, a tension in his jaw that hadn't been there the night before. He didn't sit right away, just stood there, running his hand through his hair in that way he always did when he didn't know how to begin. I shouldn't have kissed you, he said. Emma closed her eyes. She whispered, but I kissed you back. He finally sat beside her. Close, but not too close. She hated how badly she wanted to close the space between them. "This isn't just some high school crush, Emma," he said, voice quiet. "This is more. And that scares the hell out of me." Because of Katie? He nodded. Because of everything. Because once this line is crossed, we can't go back. "Do you want to?" His silence was her answer. And still, neither of them stood up. Neither of them walked away. Because the truth was, no matter how dangerous this was, it was real. And real things had a weight that was hard to ignore. The next week became a blur of contradictions. Emma tried to act normal around Katie, laughing at her jokes, binge, watching bad teen dramas, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. It lived in the way Emma flinched when Katie mentioned Liam, in the way she avoided his gaze across the dinner table, in the silence that filled every space between what she wanted to say and what she was allowed to. One evening, after a lazy Sunday cookout in the Williams' backyard, Katie pulled Emma aside and plopped down on the swing set like they used to when they were 12. "You okay?" she asked, chewing her bottom lip. "You've been weird lately." Emma forced a laugh. "Weird how?" "I don't know." "Quiet, you zone out all the time." "Did something happen with Derek?" Emma blinked. Derek had been a guy from school she'd kind of dated, more out of pressure than actual interest. She hadn't thought about him in weeks.
"No," she said quickly.
I've had a lot on my mind." Katie narrowed her eyes in that way she did when she was putting puzzle pieces together. "Is it someone new?" Emma swallowed hard. "No." A beat passed. Then Katie smirked. "God, I hope not, Liam. That would be so gross." Emma laughed, or tried to, and it came out like static. Katie didn't notice, but Emma felt it, the lie, heavy and bitter in her mouth. Later that night, she found Liam in the garage. He was working on the Buick again, grease staining his hands, music low on the old radio. She leaned against the door frame and just watched him for a moment. He looked so focused, so steady. "I told her nothing was going on," Emma said softly. Liam looked up, surprised.
She asked.
Kind of. Not directly. But she suspects something. He set down the wrench and wiped his hands on a rag. "This isn't fair to you." "It's not about fair." "Yes."
It is.
Emma crossed the room and stood in front of him. "I don't care what it's called. I don't care if it's secret or wrong or selfish. I just know that I can't go back to pretending I don't feel this." He looked at her like he was drowning. And maybe he was. "Me neither," he admitted. "But we have to be careful." So they were. They became experts in secrets. Quiet glances in crowded rooms, brushing hands in dark corners. Late night texts that never said much but meant everything. Emma lived for those small rebellions. A wink across the kitchen, a shared smile during family movie night, a moment when their knees touched beneath the table and neither of them pulled away. But it wasn't sustainable because real love doesn't like to stay in the shadows. It demands light. The breaking point came 2 weeks later. It was late. Almost midnight, and Katie had fallen asleep again watching Netflix. Emma had gone to the kitchen for water when she ran into Liam in the hallway. The house was dark except for the blue glow from the TV. He didn't say anything, just reached for her hand and pulled her gently into the guest room before she could think. The door clicked softly behind them. The room was small. The bed was unmade. His heart was racing beneath his teeth. Shirt and hers was trying to match it beat for beat. "I've been trying to keep my distance," he whispered. "I know. It's not working." And then he kissed her again, this time slower, deeper, with the kind of ache that only comes from too much holding back. Emma clung to him like he was the only solid thing in the world. For those minutes, there were no lies, no risks, just mouths and hands and the sharp, sweet pain of wanting something you know you shouldn't take. But then the door opened. Light poured in, and Katie stood there. The world stopped. She didn't say anything. She didn't scream or cry. She just looked at them, at Emma, at Liam, at their hands still locked, and something behind her eyes shattered. Emma tried to speak, but no sound came out. Katie turned and walked away. The door swung shut behind her. Emma couldn't breathe. Summer crept in like a ghost, slow and hot, thick with air that clung to the skin and days that bled into one another without form or meaning. Emma moved through it like someone underwater, heavy, limbed, and quiet, watching her life continue around her, but never quite feeling like she was inside of it. The town didn't change much. Kids still raced their bikes down the cracked sidewalks. The diner still smelled like coffee and grease, and the 4th of July parade was just as loud and underwhelming as ever. But Emma had changed. Something had unraveled inside her the night Liam left, and no amount of sleep, time, or silence could quite sew it back together. Everywhere she went, there were echoes of the past. The bench in front of the bookstore where Liam once surprised her with iced coffee, and the kind of smile that made her whole body feel electric. The swing at the park where she and Katie had shared their first real conversation about life after high school. The lake where all of them, Liam, Katie, Emma, used to swim until their skin puckered and the mosquitoes drove them back to shore, dripping and breathless with laughter. Now those places just reminded her of what wasn't there anymore. Katie still hadn't spoken to her. It had been over 2 months. There were moments Emma caught glimpses of her at the farmer's market or across the street downtown, walking with other people. Her laugh always found Emma before her eyes did, and then when their gazes met, if they ever did, it was brief and full of something like thunder. Katie's expression would go blank. Not angry, not cruel, just removed, as if Emma had become someone she used to know, a name in a diary she no longer opened. Emma never approached. She didn't have the right to. She spent her days working part-time at the local library, shelving books and helping tourists find maps to hiking trails. The job was quiet, and that suited her. She read between tasks, drank too much coffee from the break room machine, and tried not to look at her phone every time it buzzed, hoping for a message from someone she wasn't supposed to be waiting for. But Liam didn't text. He didn't call, not for weeks. Once, late at night, Emma opened a blank text message and typed out everything she wanted to say. I miss you. I miss your voice. I saw your sister today, and she looked happy. I wish we could talk like we used to, without fear. I wish I could ask you where you are, what the sky looks like where you are, if you still think of me. She never sent it. Instead, she let the message sit in drafts, a monument to the words she still wasn't brave enough to say out loud. One Saturday in mid-July, the sky cracked open with a sudden downpour that emptied the streets and turned the air into a curtain of rain. Emma was walking home from work, umbrella-less and soaked to the skin, when she ducked under the awning of the coffee shop to catch her breath. She pressed herself against the wall, hair dripping into her eyes, when she heard the sound of someone clearing their throat. She turned. Katie, holding an umbrella, a coffee in each hand, and a look in her eyes that Emma couldn't read. Emma froze. Her lips parted slightly, rain trailing down her cheeks. Katie didn't say anything at first, just extended one of the cups. It's just black. I didn't know if you still like it the same way. Emma took it with trembling hands. I do.
A pause.
Long?
Awkward. Then Katie said,
Can I sit? Emma gestured toward the bench under the awning. Yeah. They sat side by side. The rain thudded against the sidewalk. Cars passed in waves of mist and engine noise. "I've been really angry," Katie said finally. "I know." Katie glanced at her. "Not just at you. At him, too." "At myself?" Emma didn't reply. There was nothing she could say that would undo what had been done. I kept thinking. Katie continued, "If you were going to fall in love with anyone, why did it have to be him? Why my brother?" Emma swallowed. "I didn't plan it." "I know you didn't. That's the worst part. You didn't plan it, and it still broke everything." Emma's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." Katie nodded slowly, staring out into the rain. "I believe you, but that doesn't fix it. I know. I've spent the whole summer trying to erase you from everything. From my phone, my playlists, the places we went. But the truth is," she paused, voice cracking. "The truth is you were my best friend, and I still don't know how to live without you." Tears blurred Emma's vision. "You don't have to." Katie turned toward her. "Do you still love him?" Emma didn't hesitate.
Yes.
Katie looked away, nodding. "Then we'll never be the same again." Emma's heart broke a little more at that. "I didn't expect us to be. I didn't want us to be strangers. We won't be. But it's going to take time." Emma nodded, trying to keep her tears in check. "I'll wait however long you need." Katie didn't promise anything. She didn't smile. But she stayed a little longer beneath the awning, and that, Emma decided, was enough for now. Later that night, after a long shower and too many cups of tea, Emma's phone lit up with a new message. "Liam, are you awake?" Her heart stuttered.
Emma, yes!
"Liam, I saw a diner in Utah with your name carved into the table. You think it was you?" She smiled for the first time in days. "Emma, was there a coffee stain next to it?" "Liam." "Yeah." Emma then probably. "Liam, I miss you." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Emma, I miss you too." "Liam, I've been thinking about what we said, about doing it the right way. It's not going to be easy, but I still want to try. If you still want me." Emma stared at the screen, her chest aching in that sweet, hopeful way that only real love could cause.
Emma, yes.
"I want you. But I also want to be strong enough without you. I want us to come back to each other as whole people, not pieces. Liam, then we're doing this the right way." For the first time in weeks, Emma slept peacefully. August arrived with sweltering heat and the buzz of endings. College loomed on the horizon for some. Others stayed enrolled in community programs or took gap years to breathe. Emma decided to stay close to home for now, attending a local college while saving money, spending her days in the library, evenings journaling and listening to music on the porch. She and Katie weren't back to what they were. But they were speaking now. Slowly, cautiously. They texted sometimes, short, careful sentences that didn't poke too hard at old bruises. Once they ran into each other at the lake. It was awkward at first. Then Katie invited her to sit. They talked about books, about a memory from childhood when they had both believed the water could cure sadness. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something. Liam sent photos every few days. A desert sky in Arizona, a rainstorm in Colorado, a dog he'd met at a gas station in Kansas. Emma printed them out and taped them on her bedroom wall like postcards from a love that was still alive. Their conversations deepened. Late night phone calls, voice notes, long, rambling texts about fears, hopes, dreams. He told her he wanted to go back to school, study mechanical engineering. She told him she wanted to write stories, poems, maybe even a book one day. They were building something slowly, carefully, this time without lies. One evening in late September, Emma came home to find a box on her porch. No return address, just her name scrawled in Liam's handwriting. Inside, a small notebook. On the first page, Oh, things I didn't know how to say out loud. She opened it and began to read. The notebook sat on her lap like a secret someone had finally trusted her to keep. Emma stared at the handwriting on the first page. Liam's looping scrawl, messy and thoughtful, always slightly slanted like he was in a hurry to get the truth down before it slipped away. Things I didn't know how to say out loud. She turned the page. The first entry was dated 2 months ago. Right after he'd left, I couldn't sleep last night. I kept hearing your voice in my head, telling me to come back, telling me to stay. But I knew I had to go. Not because I didn't love you, because I did. And that scared me. I've never loved anyone enough to change my life before. Emma's chest ached as she kept reading. Do you remember that day at the lake when you swam out farther than you ever had before, and you turned back and called out, "Is this far enough?" And Ayenli, if it scares you a little, that's what this feels like. Like I'm in the deep part. Scared. But swimming anyway. The entries continued. Pages filled with memories, confessions, quiet moments on the road. He wrote about the towns he stopped in, the strangers he met, the way everything reminded him of her. He wrote about guilt, about feeling like he had betrayed Katie. He wrote about how hard it was to be alone, how sometimes he'd pass a roadside diner and instinctively check for her face through the window. There's this stretch of road between New Mexico and Arizona where the sky feels like it's trying to tell you something. I pulled over and just stared for an hour. I thought about you the whole time. I think you're my sky, Emma. Tears slid silently down her cheeks as she read. Every word cracked her open a little more. But it also stitched something inside her back together. She wasn't crazy. She hadn't imagined it. What they had was real. Still fragile, still uncertain, but real. She closed the notebook slowly and pressed it to her chest. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her room was too quiet, her mind too loud. At 20:17 a.m., she grabbed her phone and called him. He answered after 2 rings, his voice groggy but warm. "Emma." I read it. She whispered. A pause. "Yeah." I don't know what to say. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to have it." She sat up in bed, brushing her fingers over the cover of the notebook. "You were right, you know. About the lake. About how scary it is to swim out that far. I wasn't talking about water." Huh. I know. There was a silence then. Thick, charged, but not uncomfortable. "I want to see you," she said quietly. "I want that too." "Are you coming back soon?" He hesitated. "I was waiting for you to say you wanted me too." Her heart stuttered. "I do." "Then I'll be there soon." When they hung up, she stared at the ceiling for a long time, trying to imagine what it would be like to see him again. Would it feel the same? Would it feel different? Would the weight of everything they'd gone through fall away or settle even heavier around them? She didn't know. But for the first time in months, the not knowing didn't feel unbearable. The next day, she ran into Katie at the bookstore downtown. They reached for the same novel at the same time, an old poetry collection by Mary Oliver, and both froze, fingers brushing over the cover. Katie laughed softly. "You always did like the sad stuff." Emma smiled. "I think it's hopeful. Just quiet about it." They stood awkwardly for a moment, both holding the book. "Take it," Katie said, releasing her grip. "Maybe we can read it together sometime," Emma offered. Katie met her gaze. Maybe. And that was how it started. Coffee on Tuesday mornings, always at the same spot, always under the pretense of catching up. They talked about books, about school, about life. They never dove straight into the hard stuff. But every week, their conversations grew a little deeper. The air between them softened. One morning, Katie stirred cream into her coffee and said, without looking up, I read that when you go through grief with someone, it bonds you forever. Not because it's easy, but because surviving the pain together makes you family in a different way. Emma nodded, heart pounding.
Are we surviving it?
I think we are. There was a long pause. I'm not going to lie and say I'm completely over it, Katie said. But I also know that holding on to anger is like swallowing poison and expecting the other person to die. Emma reached for her hand. Thank you. Katie's eyes filled, but she smiled. Don't make me regret it. Wouldn't dream of it. 3 days later, Emma was sitting on the back steps of her porch, legs tucked under her, watching the wind move through the trees like an invisible current. When she heard the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway, her breath caught. She stood slowly, and there he was,
Lamb.
leaning against the side of his beat-up truck, hair longer than she remembered, eyes as blue as ever. He looked different, more worn in, like denim that had seen rain and sun and time. But he also looked exactly the same. He didn't move at first, just stood there letting her take him in, and then he smiled. That crook, tired, impossibly tender smile. She ran. He met her halfway, their arms wrapped around each other with the kind of force that only people who've been H'ing know. She buried her face in his shoulder, breathing him in. Dust, cologne, something faintly citrus. I missed you, she whispered. They didn't speak for a long time, just stood there, wrapped in the silence of everything they couldn't say before. Later, they sat on the porch steps. She held his hand like it was something sacred. He rested his head on her shoulder. I thought about you every day, he said. I know. I read it. He smiled. And even the part about the gas station dog. Especially that part. They talked until the sky turned pink and the cicadas sang their slow summer song. And when it got dark and the porch light flickered on, Emma turned to him and said, You're not staying just for me, right? He looked at her. No, I'm staying for me and for whatever we build together. It was the right answer, not a promise, a choice. The days that followed weren't perfect. There were hard conversations about boundaries, about fears, about how to not lose themselves in each other. There were moments where Emma wondered if the cracks between them would reopen, but every time doubt rose, so did Grace, and that was enough. They went slow. Coffee dates, walks by the lake, no rushing, no pretending that the past didn't happen, just two people choosing each other day by day. One afternoon, they walked into the bookstore hand in hand, and the owner smiled knowingly. Back again. Emma grinned. Back for good. Katie was already inside. She looked up when the door jingled and saw them. There was a moment where no one breathed. Then Katie raised her coffee cup in a quiet toast. It took you long enough. I am blinked. You okay with this? I'm still your sister, she said.
And she's still my best friend.
So yeah, I'm okay with it. For real this time. They stood in a circle, not perfect, but healing, and maybe that was more powerful than anything else. Later that night, Emma sat on her porch, watching the stars. Liam joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. He said, when I was on the road, I kept thinking about how we might never get back here, that I might have ruined everything. She leaned against him. You didn't. You just gave us the space to grow. Sometimes love isn't holding on. It's letting go and seeing who comes back. He kissed her temple. Thanks for waiting. I wasn't waiting, she said softly. I was becoming. He smiled. And for the first time, they sat in silence, not because they were afraid, but because they didn't need words anymore. They were already home. It started with the sound of Liam's phone buzzing on the nightstand at 6:41 a.m. Emma barely stirred under the covers, her face still pressed into his chest. But Liam, already a light sleeper since coming back, cracked one eye open and reached for the phone, careful not to wake her. One missed call, then a voicemail from Portland. He sat up slowly, the bedsheet sliding off his shoulder. The message was from a friend he'd worked construction with before he left, an old foreman now running a growing firm in Oregon. The message was short, direct. Hey man, I heard you're back in town. Listen, we've got a big residential project up here. 6 months minimum, great pay, travel stipend. I need someone who can manage site logistics and keep the crew sane. That was you last time. Think about it. We need an answer soon. Liam stared at the screen, heart thudding. He hadn't thought about leaving again. Not really. Not now. Not when things with Emma were finally beginning to feel like something solid. But solid didn't mean settled. And a part of him, some stubborn, buried part, still believed he needed to prove something to himself. That he wasn't just floating through life, that he could be counted on. That he could be a man who didn't run, but also didn't stay still out of fear. Emma stirred beside him and blinked awake, squinting up at him. Hey, she whispered, voice groggy. Why are you awake? He hesitated. I got a message. She reached up and laced her fingers through his. Everything okay? He nodded slowly. Yeah. Just work stuff. Emma smiled sleepily, pulled him back under the covers, and nestled against him again. But as he held her close, Liam's mind stayed tangled in the question he didn't yet have the courage to ask out loud. What happens when love and purpose aren't in the same place? That afternoon, Emma returned from her shift at the local library to find Liam sitting on the porch, notebook open, pen in hand. He wasn't writing, just staring at the blank page. Lost in thought, she stepped up quietly behind him and wrapped her arms around his shoulders. That's a dangerous look. He smiled weakly. It's nothing. She kissed his cheek. It's not nothing. You only get that face when you're thinking too hard. He closed the notebook. God offered a job, he said simply.
Out of town. Out of state, actually.
Emma's stomach dipped.
Where?
Portland. She blinked. That's
Far.
Yeah. How long? 6 months? Maybe more? There was a pause. Not angry, just full. And are you thinking about it? She asked carefully. I don't know. He admitted. It's a good opportunity. But everything here feels like home now. You feel like home. Emma stepped back and sat on the porch rail across from him. Then why does it feel like you're halfway out the door again? That hit harder than she intended. I'm not trying to leave, he said quickly. But I can't stop thinking about what it means if I don't go. What if I'm choosing comfort over growth? She looked at him for a long moment, then glanced out over the trees. Do you really think staying with me is choosing comfort? No, he said immediately. That's not what I meant. But the sting was already there. Emma bit the inside of her cheek, forcing herself to stay calm. I want you to do what's right for you, Liam. But I need to know, am I part of that? Or just something you're afraid to walk away from again? He stood and crossed to her, placing his hands gently on her waist. You're everything I want. I just don't want to wake up one day and realize I stopped growing because I got comfortable. And I don't want to resent you or myself for it. Emma's throat tightened. I know that fear, she whispered. I've lived with it too. But growing doesn't always mean leaving. Sometimes it means staying and building. His eyes softened, and he pulled her close. I don't want to hurt you again. She nodded. Then let's figure out how to grow together. They didn't decide anything that day or the next, but the distance between them, once filled with healing, now had a shadow. Neither of them named it, but it was there. A week later, Katie invited them both to dinner. It was the first time they'd all sat together since everything. Emma was nervous. Liam looked uncomfortable in the passenger seat on the way over, tapping his foot against the floorboard. But when they arrived, Katie opened the door with a crooked smile and said, "It's just lasagna, not a courtroom. Dinner was okay. Not easy, but not terrible." They talked about their childhood, about books they were reading, about Emma's library event for local kids. They didn't talk about the job or the past. But after dinner, while Emma was inside helping clear the table, Katie cornered Lam on the back patio. "So," she said, sipping a glass of wine. "Portland." Lam stiffened. "She told you?" "She didn't have to. I know you, and I heard you talking to Mason on the phone." He sighed. "Katie, I'm not going to lecture you, but I will say this. Don't make the mistake of thinking you have to choose between being good for Emma and doing something that challenges you." Eliam frowned. "Isn't that what I'm doing?" "No," Katie said gently. "You're trying to figure out if you can chase something without losing her in the process. And the answer is yes, if you both decide to be brave." He looked at her. "I never wanted to hurt either of you."
I know!
She said. "But hurting people is part of life. Choosing how you heal together, that's the love part." Later that night, Liam sat beside Emma on her bed, watching the way she folded laundry with almost meditative focus. "Come with me," he said suddenly. She looked up.
What?
"To Portland. For the summer. Or a few weeks, or even just a weekend. Come with me, see what it's like." Emma stared at him. "Lime, my whole life is here. The library. My classes. My work with the kids. I'm not asking you to leave it all behind. I want to know what this looks like in a different place. I want to try." Emma didn't answer right away, but 2 weeks later, she packed a small suitcase and they hit the road. They drove in silence for the first few hours. Not tense, just quiet. Then, somewhere near the Colorado border, Emma reached over and laced her fingers with his, and he looked at her and smiled like the sun had just come out. Portland was different. It rained a lot. The city was loud and fast, filled with people who didn't make eye contact and streets that seemed to shift every time you turned around. Liam worked long hours. Emma spent her days at cafes trying to finish a grant proposal for a library project back home. They fought about small things, dishes, late nights, missed calls. But they also laughed more than they had in months. One night, drenched from the rain, they danced barefoot in the tiny kitchen of their Airbnb, spinning to a Billie Holiday record they found in a dusty thrift store. Another night, Liam came home and found Emma asleep at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers and half-eaten pizza. He lifted her gently and carried her to bed, brushing her hair from her face and whispering, "You're the best part of my life." The time in Portland wasn't perfect, but it was real. And when Emma finally looked at Liam one evening and said, "I want to go home," he didn't flinch. He nodded. "I'll come with you." They left the city 2 days later. On the drive back, they stopped at a lookout point on the edge of Idaho. The sky stretched endlessly above them, golden and soft and impossibly wide. Emma leaned against the hood of the truck and looked at him. "We're not the same people we were a year ago," she said. "I know. We've changed. We've grown, and we've stayed," he added. "Even when it was hard." She nodded. He pulled her into his arms. "I love you. I love you too." It wasn't a perfect ending. It wasn't even an ending, but it was enough. Because love, they had learned, wasn't about never leaving. It was about always finding your way back. Autumn arrived slowly that year, painting the leaves in soft reds and golds like time had finally decided to move gently. Emma stood on the porch of her childhood home, wrapped in an oversized sweater, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. The town looked the same, quiet streets, familiar faces, but she didn't feel like the same girl anymore. A year ago, everything was different. Her world had cracked open in ways she couldn't have imagined. And now, as the chill settled into the air, Emma found herself somewhere between where she had been and where she was going. Liam had started working at a small construction firm just outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it was stable, honest. He came home covered in sawdust and sunburn, exhausted but happy. They'd rented a small cottage near the lake. Not quite a house, not quite a cabin, just enough space to hold their silence and their laughter. But life wasn't perfect. Emma still carried quiet aches, fears she didn't always speak aloud. She still sometimes woke in the middle of the night, wondering what would happen if things fell apart again. If loving Liam would someday mean losing him. Liam noticed. He always did. One night, she sat on the floor beside their fireplace, sorting through old papers, when she found the letter she'd never sent. The one she wrote him when he was gone, the one she couldn't bring herself to burn. She held it in her hands for a long time. Liam came in from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel, and saw the look on her face. "Is that what I think it is?" he asked. Emma didn't answer at first. Then she nodded.
Yeah. Can I read it?
She hesitated. "I'm not asking because I want to feel guilty," he added. "I just want to know the part of you I wasn't brave enough to see." Emma handed it to him. He sat beside her, unfolded the paper, and began to read. The words were raw, vulnerable, full of heartbreak and hope. She wrote about missing him in ways she didn't know how to explain, about waking up angry, about walking past places that used to feel like both of them. She wrote about forgiving him before he even asked, and how that forgiveness hurt just as much as the leaving. When he finished, he didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms and held her tightly. She felt his chest rise and fall beneath her cheek. "I didn't deserve you," he said. Emma looked up at him.
Don't say that.
"It's true." You waited. You stayed soft. You didn't have to. She took a breath. "You didn't ask me to wait."
I chose to.
"Because love isn't about deserving,
It's about staying.
even when it's hard." They sat like that for a long time, in silence, but not alone. That fall brought something else, too. A letter from a university Emma had applied to months ago, not expecting anything to come of it. She opened it in the kitchen, hands shaking. Liam was outside, fixing a loose shutter. She called him in. "I got in," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He blinked. "Wait, what?" "To the graduate program. Children's literacy and education. It's in Boston." He stared at her. "Boston." She nodded slowly. He didn't speak right away. Just leaned against the counter. "Processing?" "That's amazing," he said finally. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You okay?" he asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "It's everything I wanted, but it's far." "Yeah." They both stood there. For a moment, the distance already beginning to stretch between them. Not physically. Emma set the letter down. "I haven't accepted it yet." "Why not?" "Because of you." Liam walked to her and took her hand. "Emma, this is your dream. You can't stay just for me." "I'm not staying just for you," she said. "But I also don't want to chase a dream if it means losing the life we're building." He touched her cheek. "Then we figure it out. Together." That night, they lay in bed facing each other. "What if this is a fork in the road?" she whispered. Liam thought for a long time before answering. "What if it's not a fork?" he said. "What if it's a detour? What if we take a different path for a little while?" and still end up in the same place. Emma stared at him. Are you saying we try long distance? I'm saying we try. Whatever it looks like. She bit her lip. I don't want to lose us.
You won't.
But what if he stopped her with a kiss? Emma, I've left once before, and it nearly killed me. I'm not walking away again. If this is your next step, I'll find a way to take it with you, even if I'm not there every day. She buried her face into his chest and cried, not because she was sad, but because she finally believed him. 3 months later, Emma moved to Boston. The goodbye at the airport wasn't dramatic. No running down the terminal. No screaming through security. Just quiet tears, tight hugs, and whispered promises. They FaceTimed every night, sent each other postcards from places they visited. Emma sent him pictures of her classroom and stacks of children's books. Liam sent her videos of the house he was helping renovate and silly messages that made her laugh at 3 a.m. But it was hard. There were nights when the silence between them grew too heavy. Nights when Emma questioned if love could stretch across time zones. Nights when Liam lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if one day she'd wake up and realize her world was bigger without him in it. Then came the storm. A blizzard hit the East Coast in February. Emma was stuck in her apartment for days. Her heat went out, pipes froze, and then she got sick. Fever, cough, exhaustion. She didn't tell Liam right away. She didn't want to worry him, but he knew something was wrong. You're too quiet, he said during their nightly call. Tell me what's going on? She tried to smile. I'm fine, just tired. Emma, I promise I'm okay. She hung up before he could say more. 4 hours later, someone knocked on her door. She opened it and nearly collapsed. Liam stood there, covered in snow, shivering, holding a bag of groceries and a blanket. What the hell are you doing here? She whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. You didn't sound okay, he said simply.
So I came.
She threw her arms around him and sobbed. That weekend, he stayed by her side, made soup, held her hair when she got sick, watched cartoons with her like they were kids again. And when she finally started to feel better, she curled up beside him and whispered, "Marry me." He blinked. What? I'm serious. I don't need perfect timing or a big ring. I just need you. Liam smiled, brushed her hair from her face, and whispered, only if I get to ask next time. She laughed through her tears, and he kissed her like it was the first time all over again. They didn't get married that year, or even the next. Life still had its demands. Emma finished her program. Liam took on more projects. They learned to navigate 2 cities, 2 time zones, 2 lives. But through it all, they chose each other every single day. And eventually, they came back home to the cottage by the lake, to porch mornings and late night fires, to laughter, to forgiveness, to love that wasn't perfect, but was real. People in town still sometimes whispered about their story, about the girl who fell for her best friend's brother, about the heartbreak, the leaving, the coming back. But to Emma and Liam, it wasn't a story. It was just life. Messy, beautiful, unfinished. One evening, years later, they sat watching the sunset, their daughter asleep inside, her tiny socks still clinging to the edge of the couch. Emma leaned her head on Liam's shoulder. Do you think we would have made it if I hadn't gone to Boston? She asked softly. He smiled. I think we made it because you did. She looked at him. Because we both learned we could stand on our own, he said. But we still chose to come back. That's what makes this real. She nodded. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere an owl called out in the distance, I love you. She whispered. He pulled her close. I'll love you every version of us we've ever been. And as the last light disappeared behind the trees, Emma closed her eyes and breathed in the life they had built. Not perfect, not easy, but completely and unapologetically theirs. A love that had left, returned, fought, forgiven.
A love that stayed always.